The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planted with Sarah Payan podcast. I'm Sarah Payan, your host, and today, out of Brooklyn, New York, we have Jess Poulin, who is the CEO of Woke Media, creator and host of High on Feminism podcast and High Talks. Jess, welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have you here today.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's so great to, normally I'm on the other side introducing people on my podcast, so it feels weird to be introduced.
It's kind of a nice flip, isn't it? I always enjoy it.
Yes, it is. It makes me feel cool.
It's that unique perspective. It's funny. It's like when you go onto somebody's podcast, you might have an idea of what's going on, but you don't, it's very different than when you're like getting in there and planning everything and the messaging and everything that you want to put out. I think it's good to be on both sides. It's good practice too, because then you're like, oh,
yeah,
I know what I want to do.
Yeah, I think it makes it like easier too, because I'm so used to having to make sure things are flowing, with like my podcast. And I've been on another one before where the host seemed like a little unsure of some of the questions. So I was just like naturally like, okay, let's talk about this, just like help out a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When you've done it long enough, you get to be like, to learn how to like really work on that flow. It's a talent. Like it's not something that comes easy to everybody.
Yeah, it is hard. And I get stressed out about it.
I feel that.
That's why this morning I was like, okay, I need to be prepared for this. Like, I'm a podcast host, so I have to sound like I know what I'm doing on someone else's podcast.
I always find that podcast hosts always make the best guests.
Well, I hope so. Yes, we'll find out. Stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah, no pressure. No pressure.
Yeah.
But in starting our conversation, I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, which was, what was your first cannabis experience?
My first cannabis experience was, I was very young. I'm from northern Vermont, like right on the Canadian border. And people were smoking weed at a very young age in my town, like 12 to 14, and I was on the later end. I would say I was probably like 14, 15 when I first started. It was with a family friend, because I was like, my mom didn't really talk about it with us, I knew that she smoked weed when she was younger because people insinuated little things here and there, but I just we never had conversations about it. But I always wanted to I want to be somewhere safe the first time and with someone that I trust. And so it was like a family friend, and we opened the bathroom window at my mom's house and smoked out, and she taught me how to smoke from a bowl and, how to pull and everything like that. And I did not think that I was going to get high, and I got very high, very high. And we kind of went driving around and went to her friend's house. And I just remember and I've never been this high again in my life. I think it was just a first time thing, because since then I've been fine. But it was unnaturally high. And I just remember the kid that was there was it was a baby, but how babies, when they're little, their teeth start coming in, there's little gaps in between them and everything like that. It's normally cute. But when you're as high as I was, and I saw this little baby coming towards me with this kind of jagged teeth, I freaked out.
Oh no.
I jumped on the couch. I remember just being oh my God, get that thing away from me. And my friend was trying to calm me down. And she was it's a baby. Just relax. And the mom was what the hell? What's wrong with you? So that was my first experience. And I think it took me a little bit of time before I could enjoy it and have a normal high. But for the longest time, I was just, it was a ride.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like a lot of our colleagues that I talk to who are precocious kids, the 13 to 15 spot is where a lot of people have tried their first time, at least their first time. Because I know I was 13, and I'm also from a state up north bordering Canada, because I'm from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we didn't have a whole lot to do.
Yeah, same.
So parents out there, keep your kids busy.
Yeah. I mean, we were those kids, like, I never thought I would be that kid, because I was always like very like, you know, I was a good student, got good grades and everything. But then, you know, I got a little rebellious in high school, and I was like one of those kids that would like take my lunch period and drive around with some friends and get really high, and then come back to school and like try to take a math test. And it just like wasn't working. You know? So there's not a lot to do when you're in those spots. And, you know, middle school, I feel like, is around the age that people really starting to experience with things, you know, alcohol, drugs. So it definitely was that in rural Vermont. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, you're at that age where, you know, it's like you had adults telling you have plenty of time to be a grown up. And once you're a grown up and you have all the responsibilities, you won't want it anymore. But at that age, you're just so curious about all the things that have to do with growing up. And I think one of the conversations, you know, especially around youth access that we have to have is that, you know, kids who experiment aren't bad kids. They're curious kids. You know, children are curious. And I think the smarter and more creative you are, the more precocious and curious you are too. Because I know, like, I was a good student. I was a good kid, but I was very curious. And you know, there were some people who found out, especially like some of the kids my age, was like, I got a little bit of a bad kid moniker for a while because of it. But now they listen to this podcast, and hello, all of you out there who are curious who stopped talking to me in high school. No, just kidding. But I mean, it is one of those things where I think we have to have more conversations about that, because you know, what we do as children when we get judged for it can be a big stumbling block as we get older. And it's just out of curiosity, which is so incredibly natural.
Yeah. Yeah. The education of just like cannabis in general is what I've been seeing definitely like increase over the years, but it's something that we just have to continue to really like give people, because, you know, when you think about it, even like, sure, maybe my grandmother didn't smoke weed, but maybe she did, you know, Joyce was a little crazy. But like my mom did, you know, and to like have those conversations with your kids saying like, don't do this plant, don't do this plant. And then it's like, but you did it, you know, and like this next generation is hopefully having like more education on it so that they're not even having sort of the same negative effects that, you know, the next or the generation before them had. So it really is just like, you know, everyone in this country right now needs to educate themselves. Absolutely.
I mean, I think, you know, telling kids the truth about these things, just like with sex education, you know, it's like, give the kids the facts, but also let them know, hey, this is a time where your brain is developing, and you probably want to wait until you're older. Or, you know, and as we like, research is showing that as we get into more legalization, it actually loses some of its excitement for kids, because, you know, if it's not taboo, how exciting is it?
Why do it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's like, I was from like an alcohol standpoint, I was talking about the differences just in like US versus European culture with alcohol. And, you know, it's like more like common there for kids to try a glass of wine when they're 13, 14, 15 at home. Whereas like here in America, like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And that's what makes everyone want to do it. That's what makes it cool. You know, you're doing this like illegal, you know, illicit thing. And so, yeah, the more we legalize it, I think that 100% there's going to be so many people that are maybe not going to actually participate in it anymore. So they're like, this is normal. This is like smoking cigarettes or something.
Yeah. And, you know, when they do decide to partake, it's not going to be, so it's going to be in a more metered sort of way. Like I grew up being allowed to have like a little glass of wine from time to time at dinner, because my father was partially raised in Europe. Mm-hmm. And it was like, you know, we didn't do it all the time,
Yeah.
But it wasn't a big deal.
Bottle of wine.
No. So when it came down to like being in high school and my friends getting crazy and partying, or even in college, I was kind of like, I'll have something, but I'm not going to get crazy.
Yeah.
The normalization, I think that's one of the things. I know it's in other countries too. It's just human nature, but especially in our country where we talk about, it's like from like talking about drugs to sex to book bans. It's like the people who make these choices are these gut reactions, and what they don't realize is it's doing exactly the opposite of what they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you get into cannabis as far as like with your work?
Yeah. I will say that it was like a happy stumble upon for me. I have really worked on myself the last, realistically, like 5 to hopefully 10 years, but definitely the last 5 years, I've really just been working on myself and, just kind of like reevaluating the way that I relate to other women. I always tell people, like, from an honest perspective, like, I definitely used to not be like a girl's girl, like, not because I didn't want to be, it just was something that I felt like I couldn't be. There's so much competition between women, especially, women of color, and especially like, we don't have to get into the whole of it, but like breaking down like different like color in general, like dark skin versus light skin. So there's all this competition, and I definitely feel like I was prone to being a part of that competition and wasn't really, like run the world girls. And I don't remember what it was for a turning point, but I just kind of had a sort of epiphany where I was like, you're kind of a shitty person. Like, you need to be like better in this regard, in the way that you relate to women. And I don't know if it was like maybe my breakup that happened at the time or what, but I just really realized that I wanted to work on how I relate to other women. And I've been doing that work now for, like I said, like the past, like, I would say like 5 to 10 years for sure. And one of the things that I really wanted was like a community of women. Once I started kind of getting out of that narrative of like, I have to be in competition with all these people, and really embracing them and like feeling that support from women for the first time, where I was like, oh my God, wait, we're amazing. Like, why am I trying to compete with these people? Let's work together. It was really beneficial for me. And I wanted to create a platform for women entrepreneurs to be able to like get together and talk about like how lonely being an entrepreneur is sometimes, and just having someone else there to be like, yeah, like I'm also going through a really tough time, or like, yeah, I've been through that, or just having that sort of reassurance when I was like, this was during COVID too, where I was just like, really like, what am I doing? So I started the podcast because of that. And, I was like, I'm a publicist, at heart, and that's my like general career. And the publicity mind was like, okay, well, what is going to make this podcast like even better than all the other business podcasts out there? What can I do that's different? And I was just like, well, I would kind of like to have a conversation about like cannabis and how like I use it to like get through my workday or like unwind from my workday. And I felt like we weren't really having that conversation enough, especially from women's standpoint. I feel like women feel like they can't express as openly as some men do when they're cannabis users, whether that's like stigmas around them being a parent or, just smoking not considered a very like feminine thing to do or whatever. So I wanted to just like have that opportunity to enjoy cannabis together and also like teach other women about it, because I think there's also a lot of people who are afraid to do it, and it's because of the miseducation. So we started at first with getting some cannabis sponsors. We have had so many amazing sponsors over the last like 4 years for products. Her Highness NYC was like one of our first, my Bud Vase, Yonoya, trying to think of all of them. Name them all. Empire Glassworks has been a really great sponsor of us as well. And it just at first started with creating like video content for the podcast where I would sit with the, guests, and this was low budget at first. So, our very early episodes were me hotboxing in my car with my guest. And, we had little cameras set up all throughout my car and everything like that. And we would talk about the products and taste test them and all that good stuff. And really like showcase some of like amazing like women owned brands, especially, but some of really amazing cannabis brands. And, people love. They were excited, and the guests were getting like 6 or 7 different products. And then, people started wanting to be like, oh, I want to be a guest. I want to, sponsor. I want to do this. And it was coming a lot from the cannabis industry. And that's when I realized that there was like a really missing market for this type of community, because everyone wanted to all of a sudden, like, I was surprised. I was like, oh my God, someone wants to be on my podcast. Like someone reached out to me. Like I felt so honored. So it was just fun to kind of see it like develop. And, I wanted it to be, I wanted the podcast to not just be cannabis though. I wanted it to be like all industries. It doesn't have to just specifically be cannabis, but I was like, how can we make the cannabis a part of it? And that's sort of where like the High Talks panel came into it, where I was just like, well, I love to learn, as much as I love to smoke, I love to learn about this stuff and hopefully help other people learn about it and be able to substitute, some of the narcotics that are out there and alcohol that a lot of us reach for at night. And so I was like, let me do an educational panel series where I can have a few different women from different areas of the industry, like come in and we can discuss an important issue. Like we have the platform, we have the capability of publishing this platform. Like, why don't we just create what's missing? And we did. And we have 5 episodes out. You're going to be on our next one, which I'm so excited about as well.
I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, we've had like Cassia Graham from CanEclusive on there. Niambi Taj, Peter Tosh's daughter, and from the Peter Tosh Foundation has been on there. Who else am I missing? I've had like mental health therapists on there. The woman from Mary Jane Magazine, she came on there as well. We've had so many different people in the industry, and it's been crazy because it's been it started off really quiet at first. And I don't think that people really understand how many like women are in the cannabis industry and like making these brands and publications and all of this stuff. So at first I was like worried we wouldn't have enough. And it's almost like, oh my God, we have so many. I just don't have the time to like record all these episodes. So it's been really beautiful to kind of see the relationship and meet these women. And I love learning, I'm definitely a nerd in that regard. So it's been fun for me too. And I want to, again, like I said, like sort of destigmatize the way that people look at this plant, especially women, because I'm sure we'll get into it. There are so many different uses for it in general. So I think people just need to learn more about it. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's as we started to get more into the science of it and understanding the fact that, women respond differently than men, and especially with, the levels of estrogen in our cycles. From day to day. I mean, and even, past that, like when I used to teach my women in cannabis class, sometimes I'd have women who'd come on and they'd be like, oh, well, why are we talking about estrogen? I've been through menopause. And I'm like,
are you looking for a lasting, meaningful way to connect with your audience and highlight your brand? Well, listen up, because Planted with Sarah Payan is taking on new sponsors. Here's a powerful stat. 20% of listeners are more likely to support brands they hear about on a trusted podcast. And 60% actually look up that product after hearing about it. That's the power of podcasting. Planted with Sarah Payan has a unique draw. With remarkable guests, we attract and engage audience that spans all sides of the cannabis spectrum. Picture your message reaching these listeners time and again. Podcast ads are evergreen, meaning your brand stays relevant as new audiences discover and binge past episodes. It's a long-term investment that keeps on giving. If you're looking for a targeted, passionate audience with lasting impact, the right listeners are here waiting to meet your brand. Visit plantedwithsarah.com to get a copy of our sponsorship deck today.
You still are having varied responses, and your responses are way different now than they were when you were younger. So let's talk about it. Let's unpack it. Let's look at what you're dealing with and in what ways it may be able to help you, perhaps in conjunction with other herbs too. Just going back to like what you were first saying, like, I totally get it, about the connecting with women, and kudos to you for like just being able to be real with yourself and be able to touch that like really vulnerable, like sore side that, I mean, maybe I'm speaking out of turn around that, but I know for myself, like it was never that I didn't like women. It was that I had had enough mean girl experiences that it was a really hard, bruising thing. And I didn't realize that I just wasn't finding my people.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say when I was and this was like, I was young as well. So like, don't come for me, people. I was in my 20s, but yeah, in college, I think that, I definitely had more guy friends than girlfriends. And even my boyfriend now, like whenever I say we're going to go hang out with college friends, most of the time they're guys, and he's like, what the hell? Like, did you have any girlfriends? I was like, no, when I was in high school, it's Vermont, like it's a very white state. My sister and I were like one of the only like Black people in the town. So I didn't have a great high school or childhood experience with girls. Everything felt like mean girl, like you were saying, which I think in turn made me like very defensive because I'm not one to like not stick up for myself. And so I always felt like I had to have a wall up and I couldn't let that guard down and be vulnerable with people, and once I got out of college and sort of got out of like, my college felt like the second chapter of high school, to be honest, because it was a smaller college and everything. And the cattiness was still there. So when I finally got out and shout out to Brooklyn, because when I moved to Brooklyn, I feel like I really found people that I felt like I could trust and I felt like I could be vulnerable with and open with and not have to worry about, things coming back to like haunt me just because I'm trying to open up to people. And it was hard to learn at first. Like, bitches are bitches sometimes.
Truth. Truth.
And it's so hard to like, not everyone grows out of that. And definitely, not as early, I feel like, as I sort of did. But I really I don't know. I just kind of, like I said, I had sort of an epiphany where I was like, this, I don't think this works. Like this competitive, I wasn't feeling good because I felt constantly stressed because I felt like, oh my God, like, am I prettier than this girl? Like, is this guy looking at me? Like, did I get this job over this person? Like all these things when it's like, why don't we just like work together?
Yeah.
Like, why don't we all just get along?
That's it. And you kind of, you learn how to see the signs, I think, when you meet people. Like, is this going to be somebody that I want to spend time with in my circle or not? Because I think one of the hardest things I ever learned was my mom just broke it down for me when I was younger. She's like, listen, you're not going to like everyone. Not everyone's going to like you. There may not be a reason. And that's okay, Sarah. And I still have to like sometimes do that with myself because I'll be like, well, manage your expectations of people. Like,
yeah.
And that's why I always really enjoyed spending time with men, because I always felt like there wasn't the undercurrent of the competition. But then as I started to kind of see the constructs of like what women have had to deal with through the years, and no wonder there was a scarcity thing, and we're just like, I mean, not too long ago, we couldn't open up a damn bank account without a guy. So we're still making it happen. And there are just so many cool women to connect with, and the others that aren't so cool. Well, I wish them luck.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. Have fun with that.
Yeah. I think too, it was about, I feel like I live my life and do business and all that stuff in the sense of like, what would I want? You know, like what type of friend do I want? And I feel like for the most part, like people will mimic you based on your behavior, you know? So if you're a dick to somebody, someone's probably going to be a dick back to you, you know? And if you're caring and nice and trying to, you know, connect with people, those people, if they're capable of it, of course, will, you know, want to connect with you as well. And like, they're like, oh, wow, like this person is so great to me and so nice to me. Like, I want to return that favor, you know? So I think it's nice to sort of like have like, I guess it's what's the old saying, like, do unto others as you want. That thing is real.
It is.
That is a real saying.
It is. And I feel like, you know, in cannabis, I've met a lot of really great women that do a lot of wonderful things to support one another. And even when we may be on the same track, as far as our interests in what we're doing with work, there's more around what can I do to help you, because there's enough for everybody.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I think that there's so many like ways to connect as well, you know, because even so we were originally going to do another event in June. We had to cancel it because of sponsorship. Everybody's broke, you know.
True.
But it was just so great because it's like, yeah, we had so many conversations, but every conversation led to another conversation, you know? So it was like, I love what you're doing. I can't give you money, but I can introduce you to this person who might have budget. And then we can do like a newsletter or shout out or whatever. And everyone was just like excited about, you know, doing the work. And it feels great too, because when people have come to our events, they're like, you can tell a woman plan this, you know, like it's classy, it's nice, and it's like everything you could ever want. And that feels good too. And while like our team is, you know, doing the production, having those people there in the room, having all the brands that, you know, fill our goodie bags and panelists and vendors and all of that stuff, like it's also because of them, the people that are like, yeah, I want to come and, you know, do like pre-rolls or something for you, or I want to come and do a dab bar. That sounds great. Like something that just makes it more exciting. And I love that. And I feel like women feel safe in spaces with other women, and not that we're not inviting men into these spaces. I got a story about one we did, but that's later. But we just want to like make sure that we're feeling seen and heard and appreciated and just feel safe in that. You know, regardless of if they're playing in like a fun way, like, oh, little brother or whatever, like a lot of times there's like the pressure of like, oh, you just coughed after you smoked. Like, why did you do that? You know, like sort of like just the teasing when it comes to it. And I don't want to hear that, you know, like maybe I'm nervous about smoking for the first time. You know, maybe I've like had bad experiences in the past and I'm afraid that I might embarrass myself this time. Like, I don't need some bro in my ear, you know, making my anxiety worse. Like, I need that girl that's going to like sit next to me and be like, girl, you got this. Like, let's just, you know, enjoy the ride, see what happens, take it slowly. Like, that's the vibe I want.
Yeah, that's it. And especially when there are so many women that may have used it or may not. I mean, and they're dipping their toe back in as a revisit, or it's new to them. Having that pressure is a lot. It's, you know, people might not think about it, but there's already that the stigma around it that has not gone away. I mean, in the industry, it's like we live in this like echo chamber where like, you know, people get more shit for not using cannabis than for, and that's a whole other conversation. Cause I think I've actually worked with some really thoughtful people that are not in it for the money, but cannabis doesn't work well for them, but they understand its value for other people and they really are being heartfelt about it. But then there's like, you know, when I used to do a lot of education about products, and I remember putting out a post about a cannabis tea, and a guy who knows me really well, he was kind of like, well, you know, I mean, I know your tolerance and that's really low. So why are you talking about this? And I'm like, but I'm not talking about it for me.
Yeah, it's for other people.
It's for other people because, Granted, I no longer have the high tolerance that I did at that time because I've definitely taken my usage down. I've just found that,
okay.
yeah, I mean, it's like, we adjust as we get older and we figure out what works well for us. And that no longer served me. And so I was like, THC, I get it in smaller amounts than I used to. And now I don't smoke joints like cigarettes, which is awesome. I mean, like when people say, they'll look at me, they'll hang their head and they're like, I have a really low tolerance. I'm like, do you know how much money you save? Like there's nothing to be ashamed of. Like this is your personal journey and figuring out what works well with your body. So let's talk about it. And let's share our experiences. And, when we have, family members or friends that are curious about it, we can tell them about ours and say, hey, your mileage may vary, but let me tell you how I figured out what works well for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even just the specifics between like indica and sativa, like before I knew that, which honestly, I feel like I didn't really know or start hearing people talk about it until maybe like 2014, 2015, and I just smoked whatever, like whatever anyone had at the party, whatever one brought over to my house. Like if I bought it, like I actually did not buy weed, I would say, until probably like 2017 for the first time. I always just like smoked other people.
You saved so much money.
I saved so much money, but I never knew, and then it's like now, because like I understand and I'm like, okay, like indica couch, like, okay, that makes sense. Cause I feel like, there have been strains where I smoke and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm falling asleep. Or some people say that too, where they're like, oh, like I just get super tired. And it's like, okay, well, you're probably smoking an indica and maybe you need to have a sativa or, a nice little salad or something, just to mix it all up, to balance it out. And I didn't even know that, I was smoking weed, but I didn't even know that there was like the two different kind of strains. And once I did, that like changed my whole perspective on smoking too. I went from barely being able to appear in public because I was so high and just like didn't know what I was doing to, getting up in the morning and having a joint and a cup of coffee before I start work, so it's just, it's about finding like what really works for like you and your body, and it's going to be different for everyone. And sometimes it's like you could be, I'm on the cigarette train, like you just said. Like I smoke joints like cigarettes right now, but there's probably going to come a point of time where maybe I'll just have like honey in my tea or something like that, or butter or whatever it is, and kind of just like scale it back.
Well, and the thing that's most important is, does it serve you in your lifestyle? Like what works for you? I feel like the past few years, the conversations I've been having are, I'm always starting things out with like, I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum. You do what you need to do, but this is what's right for my body. But it's a progression. Like, when I worked in a dispensary. This episode is brought to you by Fat Nugs Magazine, a global perspective of cannabis and stoner culture as a bridge to the rest of the world. Right now, you can join Fat Nugs Magazine, Beard Bros Farms, Freedom Grow, and Jailed for Weed in the upcoming Prisoners Edition and help spotlight current and past cannabis prisoners and their stories, because no one should be in jail for a plant. Find Fat Nugs Magazine's beautiful print copies at your local dispensary, fatnugsmag.com, and on socials. Cannabis culture welcomes us all. I definitely smoked on my lunch break because that's how I dealt with people. Because when you work retail, and I went back as an adult, and I was heading up education for a large chain of dispensaries, but I started with them from when they were really little. It's like, that's for somebody who's slightly introverted, that was a great way to be able to loosen up and talk to people and deal with the crap that you deal with in a retail situation. And then when I was home and I was, writing and working on stuff, all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, THC is great for me when I'm moving around and interacting with people. And I don't smoke enough that where I can't, think. I'm like, it actually is enough so that it kind of makes everything a little bit brighter and I get everything is just a little bit more introspective. But when I'm home and I do it, it's distracting. And just knowing oneself and like how your body chemistry is. Cause I know people who, like when I worked in the dispensary, would get things like, they'd go for like Durban poison or red Congolese, and they'd be like, this is what I use before I go to the gym. And I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't smoke weed and go to the gym. I'd be like, just looking around and be like, yeah, I'll get to the treadmill in a minute. But, these like nice, cool eucalyptus towels. Maybe I'll just sit with this for a second,
Yeah, I've tried working out and smoking before. I just don't think it works for me either. When I used to play soccer up in the Bronx, I would, smoke on my way there. And like right when I got on the field, it's like an hour drive. So traffic. So right when I got on the field is kind of when it would like ease out. And I was like, okay, cool. But I felt like if I smoked, and then got directly on the field, like very closely, it would be a situation where I would, be standing in the backfield, just like looking at the sky, and all of a sudden the ball would be right there. And I'm like, how did you get here?
See, that was me as a kid without the weed.
Yeah.
But it was softball, and they would put me out in left field, and my mom said I used to just sit there picking the flowers, watching the planes go by, and I was all like, la la la.
That's adorable.
Some of us are just dreamy.
Yes, exactly. That's definitely me, though. Definitely a dreamer.
So you were mentioning that you've been doing events. And, being on the East Coast, being in New York, a whole brand new world of cannabis, besides, your friendly delivery people with their backpacks now. I mean, what are you seeing? What have you been noticing with just culture and the things that you've been enjoying, and maybe even like some of the challenges that you're seeing coming up?
Yeah. Challenges are definitely just like financial, things. There's just, it's becoming, again, no one come for me. It's just my personal opinion on what I'm seeing. It feels like it's becoming a really oversaturated market. So everyone and their moms are like on the cannabis train, whether they've been there for a while, whether they just had an idea and want to go through. And I think, from what I do know for the legislation around New York, they're doing a good job in the sense of honoring those legacy owners and making sure that them, as well as, those who've been previously incarcerated for nonviolent cannabis related charges, when they're released, they have options to get these licenses as well. So I think they're doing a good job in that regard, but there's just an oversaturation. I get probably 10 cannabis event invites in my inbox every week. And it's everything from sound baths to, seltzer infused launch parties to just vendor options for all the different people to come through, panel discussions. It's a little bit of everything. It's nice to have the options, but again, it feels very oversaturated. And I think that's one of the issues too with us trying to plan, a June event, a summertime event with cannabis in New York. I think what we ran into from a financial perspective was people have all of these events already done. When we started reaching out to, it was also sort of very close to 420, which that day is becoming so oversaturated with parties and events and all that stuff that a lot of brands are even we're not even, doing anything for 420 this year. We're just gonna maybe but yeah, from a misogyny standpoint, I think that there are so many women-owned companies that are coming to the forefront of the industry right now. And especially women just do things better, we have the ability to think of 50,000 things at one time. And men just don't have that ability. So these women are coming in, and not only are they coming for a different market, different demographic, they're also doing it in a smoother, cleaner way. So for instance, there's a lot of men that probably don't even think about the networking side of it, or to build a newsletter about their brand or whatever it is. And women, of course, they think of those things. So I think we have a better chance of like really getting out there with the sleek branding. It's all like beautifully packaged. Like that's a quality brand that women are creating. I say that there's misogyny rampant in the industry just because, you know, from some of the events that we've done, for instance, like the one we did in December, we had a gentleman who bought his ticket last minute, came with his mom, and had several conversations with, you know, people that were there, some of our vendors. And again, this event was produced by my all-woman team. All the vendors were female. All the panelists were female. Everything. We did a little speech in the beginning about what exactly High on Feminism was, what we were trying to do, all this stuff, elevate women in the industry, etc. This man had the audacity to go around and, you know, talk to a bunch of people and all this stuff. And he came up to me even and was like, I love what you're doing. I think that this is great. I have a brand for you that I think would be so perfect. And I was like, I would love that. I would love a new like woman-owned brand. I think that's great. He gave me his business card for his company. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know if you were listening or observing what's going on around you, but this is specifically just for like women-owned brands. Then the next day, and I think it was maybe like 2 days after, 2 days following the event, we got tagged in a series of posts from him of him posting about the event and then ranting about how women in this industry need to step back and, you know their place because men have been in this way longer and we're forgetting about the legacy products. And he went to an event that was just focused on the women and all this stuff. And I was just like, I'm sorry, did I just step into like an alternate universe? Like, why were you there? You know, like, why were you there? And again, I think it's because they're realizing like, the event was at the House of Cannabis here in New York, which is like one of the first THC museums in the country. And they have a beautiful top floor, like velvet green lounge. It's all like purple and green and it's very classy. And, you know, it looked like, and it was, my bank account can tell you that it was a very high class like event. And I think it was like the misogyny came from like the audacity that women felt like they could be in this space. Cannabis is a man's space, you know, like women shouldn't be in that space. And I've witnessed it a few times since doing this work. And even when, you know, I'll get requests for guests from males in the industry. And I'm like, well, did you read about the podcast? Did you did you listen to some episodes? Did you see that there are no men on this episode? Like, I'm creating a platform for women. I didn't ask for men. And I think they have a hard time with that because we're creating sleeker, more fun, more like online buzzworthy activations and brands. And they can't do that. And they're a little peeved.
Yeah. Well, and to say that it's traditionally been a men's thing in a men's space, that's when I look at him, I go, son, you obviously haven't been around.
Yeah, women were the ones that were out in the field growing the plant to begin with. Like from inception, women naturally have been the caretakers of this plant.
Yeah, it's some of the most thoughtful and as I say this, you know, there are some lovely male allies and men who are doing thoughtful things too, and of some of the most thoughtful products that I saw, especially during the medicinal cannabis days, when there was a much greater risk to be involved in it in any way, shape, or form, were women. I mean, it's, you know, there are a lot of amazing female growers, female hash makers. Some of the most wonderful medicinal products that we're no longer seeing in the market were done by women. And, you know, one of the biggest reasons that they're not able to start, you know, continue in the new markets was because it was just incredibly hard for women to get funded. And that's sad. I mean, I'm seeing some women that are really making it happen. And the thing that makes me really happy is they're really supportive of other women too. It's like they're pushing up, but they're putting their hands back behind them and they're like, come on with me. Let's do this. And I really want to see more of that. And it's important. It's important that we have safe spaces to have the conversations and to support one another. And, men can show up as allies and participate, but not take over the conversation.
Yeah.
We already have enough of that at different conferences and events where we're all at. I mean, I take my lovely husband with me to some events and people come up to him thinking that he's the one in the cannabis business and I'm completely invisible. And he's like, she's the one who teaches at colleges. Not me. And I've talked to other female friends who are journalists who take their husbands to things and they said that the same thing happens. And I mean, maybe we're scary, Jess. Maybe we're just that scary.
I mean, I love to terrify men, so. I think it's just, I'm like a sociologist at heart. So, the deep rooted, feminist in me is always like drawing it back to it. But like that honestly is the truth. They understand the power that women have for sure, especially when we're all together. And I think they underestimate us at some points, but then at the same time, they know that if they give us this platform, they're going to lose credit for whatever it is, because at the end of the day, I do feel like we are the dominant species, female. And I think that they just can't handle it. And they are afraid their egos are blocking them from allowing us to have that space because they've been told their whole lives that they're amazing and they have big penises and they're so strong and all this shit. And it's just like, that's not the case. There are other women out here that are doing things far better and far more exciting than some of these men, but they are afraid. They're afraid of like shrinking into the spotlight and all of a sudden their fragile male egos are just shriveling away. Like, that's what's happening. Yeah,
it's a struggle. I have to say almost every woman I know has some story about somebody, causing issues with them as a woman in the industry, whether it's, straight out sexist behavior at conferences or working their way up the ladder at a job. There are plenty of places that really lack female leadership. And for me, like getting into cannabis as, in when I was a little bit older and I'd already had a lot of work under my belt, like working in management for like nonprofits and corporate and things like that. But, starting from the ground up, because it was a fluke that I worked in a dispensary because I was actually going back to school after cancer. And I was just like, this will be cool. Not realizing how much I'd love it and how I would bring my other skill set into it. But it's, knowing that and kind of like really like pushing up against a lot of the stuff. I just remember like, and excuse my language, but I'd have guys that'd be like, Sarah, you don't always have to be slamming your dick on the table. And I just start laughing and I go, oh, I unfurl it. I don't slam anything.
I slowly plop it on there.
That's right. I'm like, let's not be, don't mistake my kindness for weakness. And when I'm pushing to get things done, if I was a dude, there would be no question about it. Of course, exactly. I'm like saying things, and that's the one thing that I really have been loving, like, for the shit show that is LinkedIn around cannabis. Sometimes the conversations that are being had and the men who are supporting it. And then I look at them and I go, you are people that I would like to work with because you see me as a person. You're not worried about, you support me as a woman, but you see me as a person. And that's what I'm really looking forward to the day when we're in not only this industry, but just generally, where the work that we do and the energy that we put into the world is how people see us.
Yeah.
Because it's such a basic way to look at people. It's like, come on now. And they miss out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sucks though that like you were saying, you know, them having to feel like they have to come up to you and say like, oh, don't just, you know, slap it on there. But it's just like, if I don't, are you going to listen to me? You know, are you going to take me as seriously if I don't sort of like really hone in on my point?
Yeah.
Or are you just going to, you know, be like, ah, this woman just said something like whatever, you know, and it's like, we have to do that. And it sucks, you know, but it's like, we're not taken seriously. And it's hard to sometimes like, every man has a little misogyny in them. It's just born into who they are, you know, whether they are actively acting on that misogyny, you know, is another thing, but all of them have that potential in there because it was born and bred into them to think that they were better than women. Like that's just science at this point.
Do you think it's science or do you think it's the messages we get in our culture?
I think it's like, I've been reading recently about how people are talking more of, you know, your baby is potentially going to be born with the trauma of like your great grandmother because it's just ingrained in your DNA unless someone at some point actively does that. And I think that that's the same thing with like misogyny. Like historically, that's just been ingrained in them for years to come. Like, they're just born with that. Like, I'm better than women unless someone comes in and teaches them otherwise. But first and foremost, I think that natural instinct, whether it's genetics is science, but, you know, in that realm of things, I think that's always going to be like in them unless, you know, maybe it's dormant for some because they've been raised by some great women and maybe great men too. But I think it's always going to be there for them.
I find that the word feminist or feminism can be really polarizing for people. And people can feel very threatened by it, especially women who think that it means that they don't like men if they're a feminist. Yeah. And for men thinking that it's women who don't like men. And I think the biggest conversation that I've had with people is, well, if we hadn't already used humanism to describe something else, I would use that to describe what we're talking about with feminism, because it really is about, you know, what I see is that the feminist movement is also about lifting the load off of men too, so that they don't have to wear that mantle of toxic masculinity, that they can be themselves. Like, give your boy an easy bake oven if he wants it. You know?
I have that argument with my boyfriend all the time. You know, like when we first started dating, like he knew me, he like had seen the brand, listened to the podcast, so he had an idea. But I was like, I want you to understand that like I am like truly like a feminist in the sense of like, I don't want you to feel like you have to pay for everything. I don't want you to have to feel like you have to do all these things. Like, I am perfectly capable of supporting myself and also like in joining and supporting you. I think one of the most like profound things in culture that this is maybe a really large statement. I shouldn't say like the most profound, but what I felt like was profound in the moment when it came to pop culture was, you know, Beyonce's song Flawless. She has a poet in there that has a very famous speech that she quoted in there. And it says like, feminist, the person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. That's what it is. It's equality for the sexes. It's not a person who hates men, like a person who like, I don't know, whatever. It has nothing to do with hate on either side. Right. It has more so to do with just the equality of how we feel everyone should be treated. You know, like paid the same wage. Like, I don't know why that's so freaking hard. You know, like given the same sort of like time off, same higher up positions, like all of those things. The okay to be able to say like, as a father, I would like to be a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
And as a mother being like, I love to work and I want to keep busy. I'm fine with being the breadwinner, and understanding that like those dynamics are fine. We're not in the 50s, you know, this isn't June Cleaver. Like we're not, you know, in our aprons with an easy bake oven as much as like that KSU guy wanted to think we were.
Oh,
but,
that was, yeah, right.
Like, I just love that. I could talk about that too, but but in all reality, it's just point blank equality of the sexes. Like that's what feminism is. And I think men twisted it to try to make it seem like it was something bad. Like if you're a feminist, you're a butch. If you're a feminist, you hate men. If you're a feminist, like all these things that just, again, male fragile ego. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, when people come from a place of fear, how can they hear the reality? And we're seeing that in our world today. I feel like, you know, if we saw things through more of a feminist eye, people would be able to live their lives based on their strengths and interests rather than the laundry list the society's put together for us for what we're supposed to do to be whole, complete, well-functioning adults. I mean, in my home, you know, my husband was raised by a single mom. I mean, he had his father in his life, but he lived with his mom. And so, you know, he understood the value of everything that his mother did. And here, like, you know, he cooks sometimes, but I am the better cook and it's actually my creative outlet. So so when he found out I could cook, he was like, hey, if you cook, I'll always clean.
Yes.
I'm like, deal.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, that's the thing too. And, you know, my boyfriend sometimes is like, he doesn't cook at all. I got him like, he toasts bagels now, you know, he's
hey,
you know, so when it's sort of like his night to cook, so to speak, sometimes we'll go out for dinner or order in. But other times, like, especially when we're trying to like budget and everything, I'm like, I don't mind cooking. I actually enjoy it. It's relaxing for me. I like, you know, going through the process of chopping my veggies and throwing in all the spices. Like, it's a fun outlet for me. And, you know, but I don't want people to think like, because I like to cook, like I'm any more of a feminist. Like being a feminist doesn't mean that I don't think that women should cook.
Right.
You know?
It's not about gender roles.
Yeah, it's not about that whatsoever. And that's what people think it is. And it's like, but that's not what it is. Like, it's just being equal in what you're allowed to do and make and all that good stuff. Like that's it.
Yeah. Let's even out that balance of power and really have people being appreciated for what they bring into the world.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. When, you know, I know our time went by super fast today.
It did.
I know. You're not only doing your work with the podcast and High Talks, you are also a PR professional. Are you working with cannabis brands and things like that?
We're not working directly with them right now, just because, again, like a lot of them just don't have money right now for PR.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a few conversations with them and, you know, we're doing small things as far as like, maybe they're sponsoring an event, maybe they're, you know, we're featuring them on the website or something like that. I would love to work with a cannabis brand. I have so many ideas, even just from like a social media standpoint, but that's its own ballpark in the cannabis space. But I want to.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, well, I think as things start to even out and normalize, and especially as we start to see some more changes on the federal level and people aren't paying outrageous, you know, taxes that we are now because everything's Schedule 1, I'll be interested to see how that shifts what people are able to do as far as getting professional help to get the word out for their brands and different things like that. But for people who would like to follow you for the events that you're doing, also the podcasts and the High Talks, how do they do that?
Yes. High on Feminism on Instagram, website, all that good stuff. There's all past and future episodes of the podcast on there. If you want to follow my personal page for our company for PR stuff. That's Woke Media BK. And you can also follow us on YouTube at Woke Media BK. We have pre-show episodes from the podcast. We have some educational high talks episodes on there. And we are going to start releasing season 4 of the podcast in August. So everyone should check that out as well. Learn about some more amazing women.
That's awesome. Jess, it's a pleasure hanging with you, and I'm looking forward to more conversations.
I am too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sarah Payan on Facebook and Planted with Sarah on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsarah.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher. Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.